On an October evening in 1997, a frustrated armored truck employee set into motion one of the boldest robberies in American history. His name was David Gant, and instead of waiting for life to reward him, he decided to seize fortune by force. By the end of the night, he had vanished with over $17 million in Loomis Fargo cash, triggering a nationwide manhunt and one of the most talked about FBI investigations of the decade. This wasn't just a robbery. It was a story of betrayal, blind trust, reckless spending, and the illusion of a better life built on stolen money. At its heart was a man who longed for freedom, but became trapped by his own choices and an unlikely group of accomplices whose arrogance doomed them all. The vanishing of David Gant at 7:15 a.m. on October 5, 1997. Charlotte police received a worried call from Tammy Gant, David's wife. Her husband had never returned home after his shift at the Loomis Fargo warehouse, and she feared something terrible had happened. When police arrived, David's pickup truck was still outside. The warehouse door was open, and yet David was nowhere to be found. Inside, supervisors discovered the vault had been emptied, the keys were missing, and 2 of the 3 surveillance tapes had been stolen. On the remaining tape, the culprit revealed himself, David Gant, calmly loading millions into a Loomis Fargo van. It was official. Loomis Fargo had been robbed, and the man responsible was their own vault supervisor. The federal investigation begins because the money belonged to federally insured banks. The FBI immediately joined the case. They soon discovered Gant had taken over 800 pounds of cash, most of it in untraceable at 20 bills, totaling more than $17.3 million. Investigators found his wedding ring in his truck, a clear sign that David was cutting ties with his old life. His family insisted he must have been forced, but the video evidence told a different story. Within 48 hours, Gant was indicted. The FBI launched Operation Charlotte, a nationwide manhunt. Airports, bus stations, and car rental agencies were put on alert. But with a full day's head start, David could have been anywhere. Dead ends and disguises, this wasn't the first time Loomis Fargo had been robbed. Just a year earlier, a Jacksonville employee had stolen $18 million and hidden it in storage units. FBI agents suspected Gant may have done something similar, but weeks of searching turned up nothing. Meanwhile, Charlotte was packed with visitors for a NASCAR race, complicating the search. Gant and his accomplices could easily blend into the crowd. Then came the first break. A Loomis van was discovered abandoned in the woods less than 10 miles from the warehouse. Inside, agents found $3.3 million left behind, along with Gant's pistol, vault keys, and the missing security tapes. Why leave so much? Investigators wondered if the thieves had simply run out of time, space, or nerve. A trail of cash. As the FBI scrambled, suspicious spending began popping up around Charlotte. Tips flooded in about people suddenly buying cars, homes, and jewelry with stacks of 20s. One man, Eric Payne, was seen flashing cash, paying off debts, buying luxury items, and even funding cosmetic surgery for his wife and sisters. Another couple, Steve and Michelle Chambers, went from living in a trailer to purchasing a $600,000 home in an exclusive gated community, paying entirely in cash. The Chambers flaunted their new lifestyle with BMWs, diamonds, and extravagant gifts. To neighbors, they claimed Steve was a retired football player or a successful gambler. But the FBI and the suspicious local mayor weren't convinced. Connecting the pieces, the FBI began surveillance, circling in on the Chambers, Eric Payne, and a former Loomis employee named Kelly Campbell, who had once worked closely with Gant. Kelly denied being close to David, but phone records told a different story. On the night of the heist, Gant's cell phone had called her repeatedly. Pages with the code 143, meaning, "I love you," appeared again and again. It was clear now, David hadn't acted alone. As weeks passed, the Chambers' reckless spending only deepened suspicion. Michelle Chambers deposited large sums of cash in local banks, once even asking a teller how much she could deposit without triggering paperwork. That question alone generated a suspicious activity report, putting her firmly on the FBI's radar. Finally, in January 1998, surveillance caught her depositing bundles of cash, still wrapped in Loomis Fargo bands, one even bearing a vault employee's initials. The FBI had their proof. The Chambers were directly tied to the stolen money. The Mexican hideout While agents built their case in Charlotte, Gant was hiding out in Cozumel, Mexico. But paradise wasn't what he had imagined. He had taken only $30,000 with him, barely enough to survive. Dependent on his accomplices for cash, he soon found himself broke and desperate. When money did arrive, it was far less than he'd asked for. Proof that his partners were already cutting him out. Worse, he learned they were plotting to kill him. Steve Chambers had even hired a man, Mike McKinney, to travel to Mexico and finish him off. FBI wiretaps later caught Kelly Campbell and Steve discussing Gant's demands for more money, and Chambers coldly declaring it was time to get rid of him. A race against time. In early 1998, the FBI intercepted calls that confirmed Gant was still alive in Mexico. But his days were numbered. Chambers had already ordered the hit. On March 1, 1998, FBI agents raced to Mexico, locating Gant in a hotel before his accomplices could reach him. When agents approached, David sighed with relief and said, "Please tell me you're FBI." He was arrested quietly and flown back to Charlotte within 24 hours. Ironically, the very people who had plotted to kill him had just saved his life because their wiretapped conversations gave the FBI the evidence and urgency they needed. The fall of the Chambers with Gant in custody, the FBI moved on the rest of the gang. On March 2, 1998, agents stormed the Chambers mansion. Steve was arrested at the door. Michelle was taken upstairs. Simultaneously, Kelly Campbell, Eric Payne, Mike McKinney, and others were rounded up. Federal agents carted out cash, luxury goods, cars, and jewelry. Everything the gang had bought with stolen money. Neighbors watched in shock as the once lucky Chambers were exposed as small-time criminals who had stumbled into millions and squandered it in plain sight. Trials and sentences. In total, 21 people were indicted in connection to the Loomis Fargo heist. Eric Payne received 6.5 years. Scott Grant, another accomplice, received 4 years and 7 months. Michelle Chambers was sentenced to 7 years 8 months. Steve Chambers got 11 years 3 months. Mike McKinney, convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, received 11 years 6 months. Kelly Campbell, who cooperated, received just under 6 years. And David Gant, the man who started it all, was sentenced to 7 years 6 months in prison. Altogether, investigators recovered nearly $10 million, but millions more remain unaccounted for to this day. The aftermath, the story of the Loomis Fargo heist, remains a lesson in greed, betrayal, and the futility of chasing easy money. David Gant lost everything: his marriage, his freedom, and his dreams of paradise. From prison, he admitted he'd do it again, calling it once in a lifetime opportunity. But the reality was far from the fantasy he imagined. The Chambers' downfall was almost comical in its recklessness. They flaunted stolen wealth so openly that neighbors, bankers, and even strangers could tell something wasn't right. In the end, their arrogance was as much a weapon against them as the FBI. The heist also left a cultural mark. Items bought with stolen money were auctioned publicly. Everything from Michelle's BMW to a velvet Elvis painting. Thousands showed up, eager to own a bizarre piece of crime history. The lasting legacy of the heist, the Loomis Fargo robbery, didn't just shake North Carolina. It became one of the most notorious inside jobs in U.S. history. The sheer scale of the theft, combined with the bizarre behavior of those involved, fascinated the public. News outlets followed every update, and the story remained a hot topic long after the arrests. The case also revealed deep flaws in Loomis Fargo's internal security. Having one employee hold so much responsibility, access to all keys, and minimal oversight proved to be a recipe for disaster. The company would later overhaul its security protocols, introduce stricter checks, and install better surveillance systems to prevent a repeat of such a heist. Culturally, the robbery inspired books, documentaries, and even a Hollywood comedy film years later, though the real story was darker and more tragic than anything portrayed on screen. For the FBI, it became a textbook case of how greed, poor planning, and arrogance can quickly unravel even the largest crimes. Today, the Loomis Fargo heist is remembered less for the money taken and more for the human drama behind it. A story of ordinary people who thought they could outsmart the system, only to outsmart themselves. Looking back, the Loomis Fargo case is less about criminal genius and more about human weakness. It wasn't a Hollywood-style master plan. It was a messy, desperate gamble. David Gant dreamed of a better life. Kelly Campbell dreamed of escape. The Chambers dreamed of instant status. But money alone couldn't give them what they wanted. It only magnified their flaws, exposed their lies, and destroyed their lives. In the end, the FBI got what they wanted: the culprits, the convictions, and most of the money. What remained was a cautionary tale, proof that the pursuit of wealth without patience or honesty often ends not in freedom, but in chains.